My son told me to sleep in the garage, so I sold the whole property to his ex-wife. Hi, my name is Joanne Keller. I'm 66 years old, and I've lived in Ashland, Oregon, nearly my whole life. I never imagined that my golden years would bring me to the cold floor of a garage. Kicked out of my own bedroom by my own flesh and blood. Raising my son as a single mom wasn't easy. I sacrificed a lot, including my own dreams. I gave him everything: education, support, and most importantly, my heart. But in the end, none of it mattered. What's more painful, sleeping on concrete, or knowing your only son chose to put you there? If this story resonated with your soul, hit the subscribe button and let me know which country you're listening from in the comments. I read every single one. The moving truck's rumble still echoed in my ears as I unpacked my last box in Derek's spare room, my hip aching from the effort. At 66, after a fall that left me limping, I'd sold my little Ashland cottage and moved in with my son. His divorce from Lena a year ago had left him rattling around this big house alone. And when he'd said, "Come stay, Mom, I could use the company," I'd believed him. I'd raised him on my own, waitressing double shifts, skipping vacations, pouring every dime into his college fund. He was my pride, my proof I'd done something right. But now, 3 weeks into living under his roof, I was starting to wonder if I'd misread the invitation. Derek was in the kitchen when I shuffled in, my cane tapping the hardwood. He was hunched over his laptop, his tie loosened, the glow of spreadsheets reflecting in his glasses. "Morning, honey," I said, forcing a smile. "Want me to make pancakes, like old times?" He didn't look up. "Nah, Mom, I'm good. Got a protein shake." His voice was flat, distracted, the way it got when he was buried in work. He'd always been driven, real estate, big deals, always chasing the next commission. I'd admired that once. Now it felt like a wall between us. I poured myself coffee, the mug warming my hands. "You've been working late a lot. Everything okay at the office?" He sighed, shutting the laptop with a snap. "It's fine, Mom. Just busy. Look, I need the house quiet tonight. Client calls. You mind keeping it down?" I blinked, stung. "Of course, I'll be quiet. I'm just here to help, you know." He nodded, already halfway out the door. "Yeah, thanks. Oh, and the spare room. I might need it for storage soon. The garage is insulated anyway. It's just temporary." The word temporary landed like a pebble in a pond, rippling through me. "The garage," I said, my voice softer than I meant it to be. "You mean for my stuff?" He shrugged, grabbing his keys. "Or, you know, whatever, we'll figure it out. Gotta run." The door slammed, and I stood there, coffee cooling in my hands. The garage, insulated, he'd said. Like that made it a bedroom. I'd seen it. Concrete floor, a single bulb, boxes of Lena's old things stacked against the walls. My hip throbbed as I sank into a chair, memories of Derek's childhood flashing through me. The nights I'd stayed up sewing his Halloween costumes. The mornings I'd driven him to soccer practice before my shift. Had that boy grown into a man who'd ask his mother to sleep in a garage? Over the next few days, the shift was subtle, but undeniable. Derek's tone grew clipped, his patience thin. When I offered to cook dinner, he'd wave me off. "I'll order takeout, Mom. Don't fuss." When I tried to vacuum, he'd snap, "I've got a cleaning service. Okay, just relax." But relaxing felt impossible in a house where I was starting to feel like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. One evening, I found him in the living room, sorting through my photo albums. Pictures of him as a kid, vacations we'd scraped together, my parents' old farmhouse. "These are nice," I said, easing onto the couch. "Remember that summer at the coast? You caught your first fish." He didn't smile, just stacked the albums in a box. "Yeah, sure. Look, Mom, I'm decluttering. These can go in the garage, free up some space." My throat tightened. "Those are memories, Derek, not clutter." He met my eyes, his expression hard. "I need space to work late, Mom. The garage is fine for storage. You don't need all this stuff out." I wanted to argue, to remind him I'd sold my home to be here, but the words stuck. Instead, I nodded, my fingers curling around my cane. All right, if that's what you need. That night, I lay in the spare room, the mattress too firm under my aching hip, and stared at the ceiling. Derek's words, temporary, space, insulated, looped in my mind, each one a small cut. I'd given him everything, but now I was clutter, something to be boxed away. The house was quiet, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that hides a storm. The next morning, I woke to find my clothes folded in a laundry basket outside my door, my toiletries in a plastic bag, a note from Derek, scrawled in his rushed handwriting, moving some stuff to the garage. Easier this way. My heart sank as I hobbled to the garage, the door creaking open to reveal my belongings, my books, my knitted throws, my mother's teapot, stacked haphazardly on the concrete. The air was cold, smelling of oil and dust, and the single bulb flickered when I flipped the switch. "Derek," I called, my voice echoing as I shuffled back inside. He was in the kitchen, sipping coffee, his phone in hand. "What's up, Mom?" he said, not looking at me. "My things," I said, my voice trembling. "You moved them to the garage without asking." He set his phone down, his jaw tight. "It's just practical, okay? I need the spare room for work. You've got plenty of space out there." "Space," I said, gripping my cane. "It's a garage, Derek. There's no heat, no bed. You can't expect me to." "It's insulated," he cut in, his tone sharp. "You'll be fine." "I'm doing my best here, Mom." I didn't sign up for a full-time house guest. The word house guest hit like a slap. I stared at him, the boy I'd raised, now a stranger in a pressed shirt. "I'm your mother," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I sold my home to be here, for you." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "And I appreciate it, but I've got a life too. Just make it work, okay? It's not forever." I turned away, my eyes burning, and limped back to the garage. The concrete was cold under my slippers, the blanket I'd grabbed from the basket too thin to ward off the chill. I sank onto a folding chair, my hips screaming, and stared at my life reduced to boxes. The woman who'd warmed Derek's bottles, who'd worked nights to pay his tuition, now sat shivering under an old car blanket, her bones aching for a warmth her son wouldn't give. As I pulled the blanket tighter, a memory surfaced. Lena, his ex-wife, her kind eyes when she'd helped me plant roses in my old garden. She'd left Derek after years of his neglect, but we'd stayed in touch, her texts a quiet lifeline. I hadn't told her about moving in with Derek. Shame had kept me silent. But now, in this cold garage, I wondered what she'd say if she knew. My phone was in my pocket, its weight a small comfort, but I didn't reach for it. Not yet. Instead, I looked at the boxes, my mother's teapot glinting under the bulb. Derek thought he could push me out, make me a tenant in my own life. But I wasn't just a mother who'd sacrificed. I was a woman who'd survived. And survival meant choices, hard ones, the kind that could change everything. I stood, my cane steady despite the pain, and opened a box, pulling out a photo of Derek as a boy. His grin wide as he held that fish. I'd loved him then, loved him still, but love didn't mean surrender. If he wanted me in the garage, fine, but he didn't know what I was capable of, what I'd do to reclaim my dignity. Not yet. Have you ever been made to feel like a guest in your own family? The cold of the garage clung to me as I sat under that thin car blanket, the photo of young Derek still in my hand. His boyish grin mocked me, a reminder of the son I'd raised, now a man who'd banished me to concrete and shadows. My hip ached, but the deeper pain was in my chest. Betrayal, sharp and relentless. Derek's words, house guest, insulated, make it work, looped in my mind. Each one a brick in the wall he was building between us. I tucked the photo back into its box, my resolve hardening. He thought he could push me out, but I was still here, still his mother, and I wasn't done fighting. Over the next week, the garage became my world, a chilly prison I refused to accept as home. I dragged a space heater from the house when Derek was at work, its hum a small rebellion. My belongings stayed in boxes, but I arranged them neatly, reclaiming what dignity I could. At night, I lay on a cot I'd bought with my savings, the springs creaking under my weight, and listened to the house settle. But it wasn't the house that kept me awake. It was Derek's voice, low and secretive, drifting through the walls. The first call came late, maybe 11 p.m., when he thought I was asleep. I'd been in the garage, sorting through my mother's old letters, when I heard him in the kitchen. His tone hushed but sharp. I crept to the door connecting the garage to the house, my cane silent on the concrete, and pressed my ear against the wood. "She won't last long," Derek said, his voice tight. "She's stubborn, but this will break her. Once she's gone, we'll list the house. It's half mine anyway." My breath caught, my hand tightening on the doorknob. Gone. Did he mean me? Driven out? Or something worse? And the house? My house, the one I'd sold my cottage to share with him, was already his in his mind. I strained to hear more, but the other voice was muffled. A murmur through the phone. A real estate agent, a girlfriend, someone who stood to gain from my absence. The call ended with Derek's footsteps fading toward his bedroom, leaving me frozen, my heart pounding. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I pulled out a notebook from my box of keepsakes and started writing. Dates, times, exact words, everything I'd heard. March 15th, 11:03 p.m. Derek said, "She won't last long. List the house." The act of documenting steadied me, each word a tether to reality. He was planning something, and I needed proof, not just for myself, but for whatever came next. The calls continued over the next few days, always late, always out of earshot, unless I crept close. I became a shadow in my own home, timing my trips to the bathroom or kitchen when Derek was out or distracted. One night, I caught another fragment as I passed the living room, his voice low through the cracked door. "Just keep the paperwork ready," he said. "Once she's out, we move fast, no delays." The word paperwork sent a chill through me. Was he talking about selling the house? Or something legal, something to force me out entirely? I added it to my notebook. March 18th, 10:47 p.m. Keep the paperwork ready. Move fast. I didn't know who was on the other end, but the secrecy gnawed at me. Derek had always been ambitious, but this felt calculated, cold. I thought of Lena, his ex-wife, her quiet strength when she'd left him. Had she seen this side of him too? I hadn't texted her yet, but her number was still in my phone, a lifeline I was inching toward. During the day, Derek acted normal, distant but civil, like nothing had changed. "Need anything from the store, Mom?" he'd ask, grabbing his keys, his smile thin. I'd shake my head, keeping my voice neutral. "I'm fine, honey." But I wasn't fine. I was watching, listening, waiting for the next clue. The garage was no longer just a humiliation. It was my vantage point, a place to gather the pieces of his plan. One afternoon, while he was at the office, I slipped into the house and checked the kitchen counter where he left his mail. Bills, junk flyers, and a sticky note in his handwriting. "Call R about appraisal." My pulse quickened. An appraisal meant selling. Didn't throw a party in my stomach. I jotted it down. March 20th, note about appraisal, and slipped back to the garage before he came home. Each entry in my notebook felt like armor, but it also deepened my fear. Who was R? A realtor, a partner in his scheme, and what did break her mean? I lay awake on my cot, the heater's glow casting faint light on the concrete, and realized I couldn't stay passive. Derek thought he could wear me down, but he'd underestimated me. I'd survived raising him alone, scraping by, building a life. I could survive this too. I pulled my phone from my pocket, my thumb hovering over Lena's name. She'd know something. About Derek, about the house, maybe even about his plans. But calling her meant admitting how far I'd fallen. From mother to outcast in my own home. Not yet, I decided, but soon. For now, I'd keep writing, keep listening, keep building my case. Derek thought he'd win, but I was still here, still fighting. And I'd make sure he regretted putting me in this garage. The notebook in my hands felt heavier each night. its pages filling with Derek's hushed phone calls and cryptic notes about appraisals and paperwork. March 18th, 10:47 p.m. Keep the paperwork ready. Move fast. His words, "She won't last long. This will break her," haunted me as I lay on the creaky cot in the garage. The space heater's hum, barely cutting the chill. I was no longer just a mother cast aside. I was a woman gathering evidence, piecing together my son's plan to push me out of my own home. The question of who he was scheming with, a realtor, a lover, gnawed at me, but I kept writing, kept listening, my resolve growing sharper than the pain in my hip. On a gray March afternoon, the doorbell rang. A sound so rare it startled me. I was in the garage, sorting through my mother's old teapot and letters, when I heard Derek's footsteps in the house. He was home early, unusual for a work day. I crept to the connecting door, my cane silent, and listened. A woman's voice, familiar yet unexpected, carried through the walls. Not a stranger, not a realtor. Natalie, Derek's ex-wife. I eased the door open a crack, catching sight of her in the foyer, her dark hair pulled back, a manila envelope in her hand. Derek stood opposite, his arms crossed, his face tight. "You could have mailed this," he said, snatching the envelope. Natalie's voice was calm, but edged. "I wanted to make sure you got it. It's the last of the divorce papers. We're done, Derek." He snorted, tossing the envelope onto the counter. "Good, now stay out of my life." I pushed the door wider, my cane tapping the floor, and Natalie's eyes snapped to me. She froze, her gaze dropping to the blanket draped over my shoulders, the concrete floor behind me. "Joanne," she said, her voice breaking. "What? What are you doing in the garage?" Derek turned, his expression darkening. "Mom, go back inside. This doesn't concern you." But Natalie stepped past him, her eyes wide with horror. "Inside? Derek, you've got her living out here, in this freezing mess." I met her gaze, my throat tight. Natalie and I had been close once, sharing coffee and gardening tips when she was married to Derek. She'd left him 2 years ago, citing his coldness, a word that now felt like an understatement. I'd defended him then, blamed her for walking away. Now, standing in my makeshift prison, I saw the truth she'd tried to show me. "He needed space," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "It's temporary," he says. Natalie rounded on Derek, her hands clenched. "He did this to you, Joanne. You were the only one who ever defended him. And he's got you sleeping on concrete?" Derek's jaw tightened. "It's not your business, Nat. Get out." But she ignored him, crossing the garage to me, her eyes searching mine. "This isn't right. You don't deserve this." I glanced at Derek, his silence louder than any excuse. "I'm managing," I said. But the words felt hollow. Natalie's outrage sparked something in me, a flicker of the woman I'd been before the garage, before Derek's betrayal. She grabbed my hand, her grip warm. "You're not managing. You're surviving. Come with me, Joanne. You don't have to stay here." Derek stepped forward, his voice low. "She's fine, Nat. Don't make this something it's not." I pulled my hand back, not because I wanted to stay, but because an idea was forming, sharp and dangerous. Natalie's horror, her willingness to confront Derek, was a weapon I hadn't expected. I thought of my notebook, the evidence I'd been collecting, and then of the house, my house, the one Derek was already planning to sell. He thought he could break me, but what if I turned his plan against him? "Not yet," I said to Natalie, my voice firm. "But can we talk? Somewhere private?" Her eyes narrowed, catching the shift in my tone. "Of course, my car's outside." Derek scoffed. "You're not seriously listening to her, Mom. She's just stirring trouble." I met his gaze, my heart pounding, but my resolve unshaken. Maybe trouble's what I need. Natalie and I stepped outside, the March air biting, but fresher than the garage's stale chill. In her car, the heater blasting. She turned to me. "Joanne, what's going on? This isn't just about the garage, is it?" I hesitated, then pulled the notebook from my pocket, flipping to the page of Derek's calls. "He's planning something," I said, my voice low. Late night calls, talking about breaking me, selling the house. I don't know who he's working with, but I'm documenting everything. Natalie's eyes widened as she scanned the pages. This is calculated. He was cold when we were married. But this? It's cruel. I nodded, my fingers tightening around the notebook. I need to stop him, Natalie, not just for me, but to make sure he doesn't win. This house, it's mine. And I'm thinking, what if you were the one to take it? Her brows shot up. Me? Joanne, you mean buy it? Exactly, I said, the plan crystallizing. You know Derek, how he thinks. If I sell the house to you, it stays out of his hands. He'll lose whatever he's plotting, and I'll have control again. Natalie leaned back, her expression a mix of shock and intrigue. You're serious? You'd do that to him? I thought of the garage, the cold nights, Derek's voice promising to break me. He did this to me, I said. I'm just returning the favor. She studied me, then nodded slowly. Okay, let's figure this out. But we need to be smart. Derek's not stupid. He'll fight back. I smiled, the first real one in weeks. Let him try. I've got you, and I've got proof. As we talked, the plan took shape. Quiet, careful, but bold. Natalie would help me sell the house to her, and my notebook would be our shield if Derek pushed back. He thought he'd trapped me in that garage, but he'd underestimated his mother. And now, with Natalie by my side, I was ready to turn his betrayal into his defeat. Natalie's car engine hummed as we sat. My notebook opened between us, its pages a map of Derek's betrayal. Her shock at seeing me in the garage had ignited a plan. Sell the house to her, snatch it from Derek's grasp before he could execute his scheme to break me and list the property. We need to be smart, she'd said, and I nodded, feeling the weight of my decision. The garage is cold concrete. Derek's hushed calls about appraisals and paperwork. They'd pushed me to this. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was fighting. Back in the garage that night, I waited until Derek's bedroom light went out. The house was silent, save for the faint creak of pipes. I hobbled to my boxes, my hip protesting, and knelt beside the old cedar chest I'd brought from my cottage. It held my mother's letters, my photos, and something Derek didn't know about, the property deed. When I'd sold my old home to move in with him, I'd ensured this house was titled solely in my name, a precaution born of instinct. Now it was my leverage. I lifted the chest's lid, the cedar's scent sharp, and dug past quilts and keepsakes. My fingers brushed a manila envelope, its edges worn. Inside was the deed, my name, Joanne Keller, printed in bold. I clutched it, my heart racing. Derek thought the house was half his, as he'd said on that call, but he was wrong. This was my power, hidden in plain sight. I slipped the deed into my notebook, next to the entries of his calls. March 18th, 10:47 p.m. Keep the paperwork ready. Move fast. The deed was my proof, my weapon. If I sold to Natalie, Derek's plan would collapse. He'd have no claim, no payout. I pictured his face, the shock when he realized his mother, the woman he'd banished to the garage, had outmaneuvered him. I closed the chest, my resolve like steel. Tomorrow, I'd call Natalie, set up a meeting with a lawyer to transfer the deed. Derek's late-night scheming, his belief he could break me, had underestimated the woman who'd raised him alone. The garage wasn't my prison anymore. It was my war room. I lay on the cot, the deed's envelope under my pillow, and for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly, dreaming of a future where I held the keys, not just to the house, but to my dignity. What would you do if you had the power to flip the script? Be honest. Would you walk away or teach them a lesson? Let me know in the comments. The cedar chest lid clicked shut, the deed to the house now tucked inside my notebook. Its bold print, Joanne Keller, a quiet rebellion against Derek's scheming. The garage's chill couldn't touch me anymore. The document was my shield, proof the house was mine alone, not half his, as he'd claimed in those hushed calls. She won't last long. This will break her. Once she's gone, we'll list the house, His words fueled me as I lay on the cot, the space heater's glow, a faint ally. Natalie's horror at seeing me banished to this concrete cell had sparked a plan. Sell the house to her, rip it from Derek's grasp before he could sell it out from under me. With the deed in hand, I was ready to move. The next morning, while Derek was at the office, I texted Natalie from the garage, my fingers steady despite my racing pulse. "Can we meet today? Somewhere private. I have an idea." Her reply came fast. "Coffee shop on Main, noon. I'm in." I slipped the notebook into my purse, the deed hidden inside, and hobbled to my car, my cane tapping a determined rhythm. The March air was crisp, Ashland's streets quiet, but my mind buzzed with the audacity of what I was about to propose. At the coffee shop, Natalie waited in a corner booth, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes sharp with concern. She stood as I approached, her hug warm but brief. "Joanne, you okay? After yesterday, I couldn't stop thinking about you in that garage." I slid into the booth, setting my purse on the table. "I'm not okay, but I'm fighting." "Sit down, Natalie. I need to tell you something." She sat, her hands clasped, watching me closely. I leaned forward, my voice low. "You once told me this house felt like home, back when you and Derek were married. You loved the garden, the fireplace, remember?" Her lips curved, a sad smile. "Yeah, it was the only place I felt grounded, before Derek turned cold." I nodded, my heart pounding. "Want to buy it back? Cheap?" Her eyes widened, her breath catching. "Buy it? Joanne, you're serious." "Dead serious," I said, pulling the notebook from my purse. I opened it to the deed, sliding it across the table. "The house is in my name, not Derek's. He thinks he can push me out, sell it once I'm gone. But I'm selling it first, to you." Natalie stared at the deed, her fingers tracing my name. "He told me it was half his when we divorced. Said he'd inherit it all eventually." "He lied," I said, my voice hard. "He's been lying to someone else too, on calls, talking about breaking me, listing the house. I don't know who, but I've got proof." I flipped to my notes, showing her the dates, the quotes. March 18th, 10:47 p.m. "Keep the paperwork ready. Move fast." She shook her head, disgust flickering in her eyes. "That's Derek, always planning, always calculating." But this, to his own mother. I leaned back, my hip aching, but my resolve unshaken. "He put me in the garage, Natalie. I'm not waiting for him to decide my future. Sell to you, and he gets nothing. You get the home you loved, and I get my dignity back." She studied me, then nodded, a spark of determination in her gaze. "I'm in. How much?" I named a price, half the market value, low enough to move fast, but enough to secure my future. "I don't need a fortune, I need freedom." "Done," she said without hesitation. "I've got savings, and my business is doing well. I can pay cash." I exhaled, the weight of weeks lifting. "We'll need a lawyer, someone discreet. Can you handle that?" "Already know one," she said, pulling out her phone. "I'll call her now." By the next day, Natalie's lawyer, a brisk woman named Carla, had drawn up a simple contract. We met at her office, a small space downtown, the air thick with the scent of ink and coffee. I handed over the deed, my fingers lingering on the paper. Carla reviewed it, nodding. "Clean title, fully in your name. This is straightforward. Natalie, you have the funds?" Natalie slid a cashier's check across the table. "Right here." I took the check, my hands steady, and signed the contract, each stroke a severance from Derek's betrayal. Carla notarized the documents, her stamp a quiet finality. "Congratulations, Natalie," she said. "The house is yours, pending county recording. Should be official in a few days." Natalie reached for my hand, her grip firm. "Thank you, Joanne. It means more than you know." I squeezed back, my throat tight. "It means everything to me, too." A week later, I stood in the driveway, my belongings packed into a rented van. Derek was at work, oblivious to the sale. Natalie met me at the front door, her eyes bright. I handed her the house keys, the metal cool against my palm. "It's yours now," I said. "Make it home again." She hugged me, her voice soft. I will. And you're welcome here anytime, Joanne. You're not alone. I nodded, unable to speak, and climbed into the van. As I drove away, the house shrinking in the rear view, I felt a strange mix of loss and triumph. Derek would come home to find Natalie's name on the deed. His plan in ruins. I'd moved to a small apartment across town, paid for with the sale, my notebook and cedar chest beside me. He'd rage, maybe call, but I was done answering. The garage had been his attempt to break me, but it had forged something stronger. Natalie's return, the hidden deed, this sale. They were my rebellion, my reclamation. Derek thought he'd win, but I'd played the final card. And as I settled into my new place, the keys to my future in my hands, I knew I'd never sleep on concrete again. The van's engine hummed as I pulled away from the house, the keys I'd handed Natalie still vivid in my mind, their weight a symbol of my reclaimed power. The sale was done, the deed transferred, and Derek's plan to break me and sell the house, she won't last long, list the house, lay in ruins. My new apartment, a modest one-bedroom across Ashland, waited with my cedar chest and notebook, proof of my survival. I'd outmaneuvered my son, turning his betrayal into my triumph. But I knew the storm was coming. Derek would find out, and when he did, he'd come for answers. I was ready. 2 days later, I sat in my apartment, sipping tea, when my phone buzzed with a voicemail from Natalie. Her voice was calm, but edged with amusement. "Joanne, you should have seen his face. Call me." I smiled, picturing the scene, and dialed her back. She answered on the first ring. "He came home last night," she said. "Found the locks changed, his stuff boxed on the porch. He lost it." "Tell me everything," I said, settling into my chair, the notebook open on my lap. It's pages of Derek's calls. March 18th, 10:47 p.m. Keep the paperwork ready. A reminder of why I'd done this. Natalie laughed, low and sharp. I was in the living room, unpacking, when he stormed in with his key. Didn't work, of course. He banged on the door until I let him in, then saw me and froze. "I wish you'd been there, Joanne." I closed my eyes, imagining Derek's shock, and drove to Natalie's, my former house, for the confrontation I'd been waiting for. I arrived just as Derek's car screeched into the driveway, his face red as he jumped out, a box of his belongings already dumped on the lawn. The new locks gleamed on the door, and Natalie stood in the foyer, arms crossed, as I parked and hobbled up the path, my cane steady. Derek spun toward me, his eyes wild. "What the hell is this, Mom? You can't do this." I stopped, leaning on my cane, a smile curling my lips. "It's not your house anymore, sweetheart. You told me to leave the bedroom, so I left and took the title with me." He gaped, his hands clenched. "You sold it? To her?" He jabbed a finger at Natalie, who leaned against the doorframe, unfazed. "She made an offer," I said, my voice calm but cutting. "I accepted. The deed was in my name, Derek, not yours, never yours." He paced, his shoes crunching gravel. "This is my home. I let you stay here, and you stab me in the back? You think I won't fight this?" Natalie stepped forward, her voice cool. "Fight what, Derek? The sale's legal, deeds transferred, recorded with the county. You've got no claim." He rounded on her, his face twisting. "You planned this, didn't you? Both of you, scheming behind my back." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "Scheming, like you did? I heard your calls, Derek. She won't last long. This will break her. List the house. You thought you could push me into that garage, wear me down, take what's mine. Who were you talking to? A realtor? Someone else?" His mouth opened, then shut, his eyes darting. He hadn't expected the notebook, my quiet documentation of his betrayal. "That's not, you're twisting it," he stammered. I was stressed. "Okay, I didn't mean it." "You meant it," I said, stepping closer, my cane tapping the ground. "You moved my things to the garage, locked the bedroom, left me on concrete with no heat. You wanted me gone, Derek. I just made it permanent." Natalie held up the manila envelope from the sale, her smile faint. "You're out, Derek. Your stuff's on the lawn. Take it and go." He lunged for the envelope, but I raised my cane, blocking him. "Don't," I said, my voice low. "You lost this fight the moment you thought I was disposable." He froze, his chest heaving, then turned to me, his tone softening, pleading. "Mom, please, I messed up. Let's talk. Fix this. You don't want to throw away family." "Family," I echoed, my heart aching but resolute. "Family doesn't banish their mother to a garage. I gave you everything. My time, my money, my heart. You gave me a cot and a car blanket. We're done." He stared, the weight of my words sinking in, then grabbed a box from the lawn and stormed to his car, muttering curses. The engine roared as he sped off, leaving a cloud of dust. Natalie touched my arm. "You okay, Joanne?" I nodded, the ache in my chest easing. "Better than I've been in months." We walked inside, the house already feeling ascendancy hers. I sat on the couch, the fireplace glowing, and opened my notebook, adding one final entry. March 25th, Derek's meltdown. Sale to Natalie complete. I'd turned his betrayal into my victory. And as I looked at Natalie, unpacking her books, I knew I'd found more than a buyer, a friend who'd reminded me of my worth. Derek thought he'd break me, but I'd broken his plan instead. Derek's car peeled out of the driveway, his curses fading into the Ashland dusk as I stood with Natalie, the new keys glinting in her hand. The house, my house, now hers, was no longer a battlefield but a victory. Derek's meltdown, his stunned, "You can't do this," still echoed. But my words, "You told me to leave the bedroom, so I left and took the title with me," had silenced him. My notebook, filled with his scheming calls, "She won't last long," "List the house," was my shield, and selling to Natalie was my sword. He'd thought the garage would break me, but I'd broken his plan instead. Now, as the dust settled, I felt the weight of my triumph and the quiet ache of what I'd lost. A week later, I moved into a cozy apartment near downtown Ashland, a one-bedroom haven I'd rented with the sale money. The walls were soft yellow, the windows wide, overlooking a street lined with maples. I unpacked my cedar chest, my mother's teapot gleaming on a shelf, my notebook tucked safely inside. The garage's cold concrete was a memory, replaced by a warm rug under my feet. I'd survived Derek's betrayal, and this space was mine. Peaceful, earned, home. On a crisp April morning, I sat by the window, sunlight spilling across my sketch pad. I'd joined a local women's art group, their laughter and paint-stained hands a balm to my wounds. My pencil traced the petals of a rose, a flower I'd once planted with Natalie in the house's garden. The ache in my hip was softer now, eased by rest and purpose. I sipped tea, the mug warming my hands, and let the quiet joy of this new life settle in me. My phone buzzed, a text from Natalie. "Gardens blooming. Come by anytime." I smiled, picturing her in the house, making it hers. She'd texted me after Derek's meltdown, filling in the aftermath. He'd called her, raging, then gone silent, likely licking his wounds. I hadn't heard from him, and I didn't expect to. The notebook, my evidence of his calls, March 18th, "Keep the paperwork ready, move fast," was ready if he tried to fight. But Natalie's lawyer had assured us the sale was ironclad. Derek had no claim, no leverage, just the boxes he'd grabbed from the lawn. I drove to the house that afternoon, my cane steady as I stepped onto the familiar path. Natalie greeted me at the door, her dark hair loose, a smudge of dirt on her cheek. "Joanne, perfect timing," she said, pulling me into a hug. "The roses are out of control." We walked to the garden, the air thick with the scent of blooms. The roses we'd planted years ago climbed the trellis, their petals vibrant against the green. I ran my fingers over a bud, memories of our old coffee chats surfacing. "You've brought this place back to life," I said, my voice soft. She shrugged, but her eyes sparkled. "It's home again, thanks to you. I'm renting it out soon. Short term, to artists mostly. But the garden's yours whenever you want it." I nodded, my throat tight. "That means more than you know. We sat on the porch, sipping lemonade, the house glowing in the late light. Natalie had hung new curtains, painted the kitchen, but the bones, Jack's fireplace, the hardwood, were still there, a bridge between my past and her future. "Derek ever show up again?" I asked, my tone casual, but my pulse quickening. She shook her head. Not a peep, probably too embarrassed, or planning his next move somewhere else. I thought of his face, red with fury, and the boy he'd been, grinning over a fish he'd caught. The love was still there, buried under hurt, but I'd made my choice. "He'll survive," I said, "but he won't break me again." Natalie raised her glass. "To new beginnings, Joanne." "You earned this." I clinked my glass against hers, the sound sharp and clear. "To choices," I said. Back at my apartment that evening, I opened my sketch pad, the rose taking shape under my pencil. The art group had invited me to their next show, my first chance to display my work. I'd spent years pouring myself into Derek, but now I was pouring into me, my art, my home, my peace. The garage had been a cold goodbye, a betrayal I'd turned into a warm ending. Natalie's offer to visit the garden was a thread connecting me to the past without trapping me there. I set the pencil down, my eyes drifting to the cedar chest. Inside, the notebook held Derek's words, my proof if he ever came back. But I didn't need to open it. The deed was gone, the house Natalie's, and I was free. Derek had thought he'd win, boxing me into the garage, but I'd sold his victory to the woman he'd wronged, the woman who'd reminded me of my strength. As the maples swayed outside, I sipped my tea, the warmth spreading through me. The women's art group, Natalie's garden, this apartment, they were my family now, chosen not by blood, but by loyalty. Derek's coldness had pushed me to the edge, but I'd found my way back, not just to survive, but to thrive. And if he ever called, I'd let it go to voicemail, my silence louder than his rage. What's your take? Was Joanne wrong for selling the house? Or was it poetic justice? Leave your thoughts below. I want to hear every opinion.